Well, a couple of off the pace and upset winners last week in the two Derby preps. 100 points to the winner races continue this Saturday with, of course, our Florida Derby as well as the Arkansas Derby. Really looking forward to both of those races. Things will get sorted out even more as we get closer to the first Saturday of May. It's Bailey Armour and I will talk about it on Horse Sense up next.
Welcome back to another edition of Horse Sense. As always, I'm Bailey Armour, joined alongside the world-renowned Scott Shapiro. And this week we've got some exciting ones to cover. You don't think you're world-renowned? Come on, I do.
Maybe like city renowned or town renowned.
Town renowned Scott
Industry
Shapiro.
renowned, barely, maybe, but yeah.
Go big or go home. And this week we will be going big in the Florida Derby and Arkansas Derby, the next two 100-point races on the road to the Kentucky Derby as we get closer and closer to that first Saturday in May. This week we're going to break down some of the analysis on the Florida Derby and the Arkansas Derby, maybe take a stand against some favorites, look at some angles. We've definitely got an exciting show planned today, Scott. Wouldn't you say?
Indeed. Looking forward to talking about a couple of trainer angles for what we'll consider the biggest race of the week. I know the Arkansas Derby is big, but we'll start out with the Florida Derby and talk about a couple positive trainer angles potentially, but a couple of promos as always for the big week, right?
Big week promotions this week here at Xpressbet. We've got a special one in addition to our $10 Derby Preps money back special that we've been running this season, where you'll get your cash back if you finish second or third. This week, we're bringing you a 15% win boost on the Florida Derby on your winnings up to $20. So you hit a win bet in the Florida Derby on whichever horse wins. I know who I've got picked out, but we'll see come Saturday. And then you'll get an extra 15% bonus on your winnings up to $20 in just the Florida Derby.
So a money back special. So you've got insurance, and if you win, you get a profit boost. So double the pleasure, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So you get the boost if you win, which we like to be winners, but in case you run second or third, you get up to your money back. Well, a lot of other good stuff going on as well outside of that promo and the normal other March promotions that we have going on, barely a little bit longer, but $1,500 Florida Derby challenges this week, $500 Santa Anita challenges next week. Those are both, of course, tournaments. Qualifiers for them have been available and will continue to be for the Santa Anita. And my spaces, about third week of my Road to the Derby spaces, before we kind of unveil the new branding of the spaces later in the spring. But yeah, looking forward to diving into everything this week with the great action, especially in Hallandale Beach. Well, Bailey, I think we're both most excited for the Florida Derby this week. Obviously, plenty of highly talented 3-year-olds in here led by Sovereignty. But, you know, we're not going to do the traditional preview as those of you that have been watching know. We do this in kind of different types of segments. And one that I really like is the Applying Angles segment. And we're going to talk about trainer angles or using trainer stats with terms of the Florida Derby. I think both of the examples we're going to talk about, you know, we're going to talk about Sovereignty with one. We're going to talk about Madaket Road with the other. I think you can make the case they're both positives, but I don't want to give off the thought that using trainer stats is always a positive. I think they're used incorrectly often, and we'll look at some examples of those throughout the remainder of the Derby calendar and the year as they present themselves. But let's first talk about Sovereignty, who, you know, is the favorite in here. He came from off the pace to win. First off the bench when they made it like he wasn't even all that ready in that first start off the layoff to run down River Thames. What are your thoughts on Sovereignty coming into this race?
Yeah, as we discussed a couple weeks ago when we looked at kind of our early Derby predictions almost, I think Sovereignty is probably number one in the standings for me right now, especially going into this race. Really liked how he won the Fountain of Youth over River Thames, like you mentioned. The one thing that does give me pause, though, is I'm sure, obviously, you know, and for those of you that might not know watching at home, Junior Alvarado was originally slated to ride Sovereignty in this race, but unfortunately suffered a shoulder fracture after he went down at Gulfstream on Sunday. And I want to extend my condolences to the connections of Term, the horse that suffered a cardiac event, and then Junior went down on. So Manny Franco comes in from New York to pick up the mount on Sovereignty. He's on this far outside post. They do start a little bit closer to the turn here, but I like that he's outside. Sometimes in the Florida Derby, it can be hard to win coming from off the pace. I think, Forte did it, but it wasn't easy for him. So coming into this race, still pretty keen on Sovereignty, but there are some horses inside that could threaten his chances.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to knock Sovereignty. He's gotten better as the distances have gone longer, and he has shown the ability to finish, and he comes into the race off a career best effort running down River Thames over this racetrack, which was his first start over it, when, the narrative out of that going into the race was that he, might be a work or two short and, might need the race. And there were all kinds of built-in excuses. And, I didn't give him as good a look as I should have. And he was live on the tote board throughout, and he ran them down. But you're diving into a horse like Sovereignty, and I wouldn't use this trainer stat or trainer angle if he was 8-1, probably not even if he was 5-1. But when he's going to be the shortest price by far, I think you're looking for reasons to suggest why he might regress, because I think, there's a couple of horses in here that can move forward enough to get, maybe get to where he ran last time from a numbers perspective. But it's going to be hard if he, runs back to that for these horses, for him not to at least be there at the wire. So I was trying to figure out if I can expect maybe if there's a chance for him to regress. So I was looking at Bill Mott's trainers, some of his stats. And the interesting stat, that I thought was worthy in here, not only because of what it says, and I think maybe you would agree, but about, being well man off layoffs and such like that. But I think, it's something that might tell us a story here on, especially looking towards the Kentucky Derby next, that we might see regression. And the stat is second start off a layoff for a 3-year-old. So that's pretty, that might seem very specific, but it's not really, because most of those horses are coming at it. Their 2-year-old season, they're managed a certain way. So, a lot of times they're not cranked in that first start, but sometimes they run better than expected. Here's the key, though, off of a career best buyer. So he ran his best race first off the layoff. Well, Bill Mott, 6 for 50 overall, $1.03 ROI in that spot. More importantly to me is 0 for 10 with graded stakes horses over the last 5 years, meaning these are some of the horses that he's going to think about, care about, and, plan out the most. And they're the ones that seem to regress in that second start off running their best. So as someone that, isn't necessarily, a gambler like I am, but as someone that knows horses, is there anything that makes sense there to you?
That's definitely an interesting one. And I'm trying to think from a horseman's perspective why that could be the case. I think, especially with a lot of these 3-year-old colts, they're managed much more conservatively now than they have been maybe 15, 20 years ago. You just, frankly, you just don't see horses making as many starts as they used to. So you might have 2 in the late career of their 2-year-old year, and then they get the winter off, maybe go down to Florida, to a training center, to a farm, whatever. They stay in a lighter training, or they might even get, kicked out in a paddock for 30, 60 days or something to kind of give them a mental break, because these horses, especially, their bodies are maturing at a much faster rate, there we go, than their brains are maturing. So they come back together as a 3-year-old, especially with these top barns that, are giving them this really, really high standard of care. They come back into their 3-year-old year. They're like, okay, I've got it figured out. Like, we're going to try this spot. And then maybe they had a career high, like maybe we've seen from Sovereignty, and then coming back, they just aren't able to get back to that same level of mental maturity, in my opinion. Their physical fitness can be a different story, but mentally, to kind of put it together, some colts, especially colts and not necessarily geldings, kind of are later bloomers in the brain department.
Good point there. Interesting. Now, I don't want anybody to think I'm completely against Sovereignty because of it, but it isn't knock enough for me to move them down to the second spot, given the price on another. But, let's talk about another horse that isn't my top pick. I assume Sovereignty is your top pick, even though you have a little bit of concern. And I mean, I don't think the stat that I gave you is going to talk anybody off of them, but somebody maybe that was torn, I think maybe would want to listen to something like that. But he's your top pick going into this, and I know he's your number 1 horse on your Derby trail, so it's kind of hard for him not to be, right?
Yeah, still my top pick going into this weekend's Florida Derby, and definitely still first on the Derby trail for me.
Okay. Well, this horse isn't my top pick either, but it's an angle that I've used for a long time, and it is number 8 Manicat Road. Now, an interesting move by trainer Bob Baffert, who I think at this point just has too many of these top 3-year-olds to not do so, but you don't see him ship into Gulfstream Park for the stakes races down here on the 3-year period, but on the 3-year-old program particularly. You see him in Southern California. He always goes to Arkansas, but we haven't seen this of late. It's supposed to be Tyler Gaffalione aboard, but he's injured as well, unfortunately. But the key thing here to me, and why I might upgrade Manicat Road a little bit, a horse that I'm not a big fan of, compared to the other top 3-year-olds, but the blinkers going off for trainer Bob Baffert. I mean, you could look at any stat you want, but this is something that goes way back for me, way past, just looking the last few years. But when he takes the blinkers off these horses, and I know he didn't have the blinkers on the first time, I mean, it's just money. I mean, the last 87 starts and he's taken the blinkers off of horses, 32%. I mean, you can just look at any stat you want. And what it really tells me, and this is why I want to bring it up as well, and maybe you've noticed it with Manicat Road, if you haven't, fine, but just in general, what I kind of learned over the years is it's a sign to Bob with these younger horses that they're relaxing on their own. So it's kind of a real positive, and there's very little to take away. And a lot of times they've got the same speed, but they're just doing it so much more within themselves. It's true for Baffert. You see a lot of these top trainers with similar stats, not as good as Bob, but does this make sense to you? And, how do you feel with the blinkers coming off on Manicat Road?
I think that that's a really, really good way to put it, especially for some of you that might be newer to the game. Letting them figuring it out on their own, or it being a sign that they have figured it out on their own. So most often you're adding blinkers to kind of help a horse focus so they don't see as much of the field. If he's been training in the mornings and hasn't been distracted, hasn't been, looking at shadows, been looking at workmates, whatever, and he doesn't need these blinkers, to me, that shows a horse that's pretty mentally ready for a race of this caliber. And like you said, he doesn't ship to Gulfstream super often. So definitely one to pique the interest there. I don't think he's quite as good of a horse as Sovereignty is, just in my personal opinion. Depending on the prices you get on the windows, play one in the win boost promotion, play one in the money back specials, and you have all your bases covered.
Don't listen to that advice. If you like Sovereignty, you play them in both. You don't be mixing it around with other horses. And
I'm double dipping. Come on.
That's not solid advice from a wagering perspective, in my opinion. So what happened? Let's talk about it for a quick second before we move on. But since it came up, let's say you bet 10 to win on both, right? To take advantage of one.
Yeah.
Sovereignty wins, right? At 8-5, you barely make money. Your top pick just won and you barely profit. How is that good wagering?
But you still got a boost.
But not enough. You threw away the other 10 betting it on someone else.
It's true. Maybe a risk that.
And I know you would tell me, well, what if Manicat Road wins? Well, you barely make money because you threw 10 on, this is the type of convos we have in, actually the next segment, we won't talk about that, but with building tickets. But since it came up, I thought it was worth touching on. I can't get there though with Manicat Road, even with the blinkers off. It will be Mike Smith. I think he's going to run better than maybe I would have thought with the blinkers on. But for me, I like Tappan Street as the better price than Sovereignty. I think those are the two likeliest winners. I'm looking forward to seeing how Disruptor runs in his first start, at this level and going 2 turns. Any quick thoughts on Disruptor before we finish up this segment?
I think he's not an unreasonable threat to this field. I know there's certainly been a lot of buzz about him, and we'll see if he can live up to that hype this weekend. Others in the field, I would say outside of these top shorter price horses, if you're going to look for maybe a slightly better option at the wagering windows, I wouldn't talk you off Disruptor at all.
Yeah, and for me, if you're, I really wish the race played out differently in terms of what I expect the pace and the draw. But I think it's Tappan Street and Sovereignty. But Niakos, he might not even hit the board because of his draw and his style. But I do think third off the layoff, we're going to see his best. And, you never know with Saffie Joseph Jr. So I might include him as kind of a backup in some of these horizontal wagers to close things out. Well, Bailey, the Arkansas Derby, another grade one, 100 points to the winner, money back special offer, again available, of course. I'm sure all of you have opted in for it, but in case you
Yeah.
have not or you're new to the party here for Florida Derby Day, remember to opt in to get that insurance, if you will. This is a little bit of a different race because in terms of the morning line, there's a lot more separation both from the favorite to the next horses. And then I think, there's less of a case for, more of the horses in the Arkansas Derby, at least the way I saw it. But I'm interested to get your take. I mean, the headliner, of course, is Cornucopian, who got a huge number, whatever metric you look at on debut, has been, well meant for a while. Was been on the Derby future books out in Vegas, since January, and was 3-5 in this race. Comes back here, and normal logic would say this is a lot to ask of a horse, but this is a kind of a horse that has been a freak in the mornings, has been a freak in the race. We saw him, and Bob Baffert is one of the few men that I would trust to make this move when he's shipped horses to Arkansas. They've meant business over the years. I like Cornucopian, but where are you at with him in this race? Because I could see the case definitely being made against him, especially at what his price is going to be.
Yeah, for me, Cornucopian is an absolute toss. I am not including him in any of my big tickets at all. I know that the maiden last start for Bob is a pretty good angle, but if he's such a good horse, why didn't we see him last year at all? And why did it take him until February of his 3-year-old year to debut at Oaklawn and not another spot at St. Anita, especially stretching out 6 furlongs last to 9 today at a 1.125 race at Oaklawn. Like I said, he's only ever run 6 furlongs once. He has 1 6 furlong recorded work. And I'm not saying that he's not a fit horse because I've seen his morning stuff and he looks really nice. But at the same time, that's such a big ask for such a young horse, especially this early in his career. And the weather this weekend, I don't know if you've looked at it yet. It's supposed to rain on Friday and Saturday. And they don't get that kind of weather in Southern California and then train through it. So I just don't think that he's going to be up to the task on Saturday. So Cornucopian's a fade for me.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'll pick apart from what you said is I think it was a positive that Bob shipped him to Oaklawn Park because the purse was 110,000, a lot bigger than what it would have been. That was Rebel Day, and I think this is kind of a move that Bob has done over many, many years, just kind of shipping these maidens or allowance type horses into other tracks that take advantage of the bigger purses. And I've heard the term beer money horse used with these types of horses over the years, but other than that, there is absolutely no doubt this is a lot to ask. Part of it for me is I think it's a decent field, but I don't think there's any stars in here outside of him. And I also think he got a big favor with the outside draw. I don't think he's going to experience a lot of adversity in this race. I think he's the fastest horse early, and I think if he just goes to the lead, and it's really going to come down to talent. I just don't think his lack of fitness is going to hurt him. But I definitely respect you taking a chance against, unlike me, Chalker the capper here. But let's talk about how we would play this race with both perspectives. And I want to first start out with yours because it's more fun. You talked about big tickets. I know you've got more handicapping to do on some of the early pick 5 for some other content you're going to do, and not ready to necessarily speak on that here early on Thursday morning. But, when it comes to how you plan to maybe attack this race from the daily double into the race or even within the race, what are your thoughts? Because I think this is an important thing to think about, for anybody out there that hasn't bet a lot when they're against a favorite, how to attack a race.
If you're going to look at it from an against a favorite standpoint, do I say a daily double, for example, do I take a horse like Quiet Side in the fantasy and then come in against the favorite?
You don't do anything. You come up with your opinions first. So let's since I know you've got a little bit more work to do on the fantasy, let's pretend though that your opinion is that you really like Quiet Side for the sake of it. Then you want to single that horse. That's one of the favorites in the double. And then you've got plenty of chances no matter the price. It's a wide open race of fantasy. We're talking about the double with the Oaks qualifier into this Derby qualifier. I just think, that's fine. So let's say you like a horse enough in that race to single. You wouldn't need to do that because remember, you're trying to beat the favorite here. Let's say you do. Now, what would your thought process be in attacking this race? Would you like somebody enough first and foremost to bet to win, or single the horse in a horizontal sequence?
Two singles in a horizontal makes me, I don't know that I'm quite confident enough, and
Well, you don't
maybe
need
I
to.
should be.
Yeah, you just
We'll
need to know what your
develop to
opinion
that
tells
point.
you.
Yeah, eventually. In here, I definitely like Coal Battle the most. I don't think that it's, the most talented group of Derby contenders that we maybe have seen so far. Of course, Speed King showing back up, who
Your
maybe in
boy.
his most recent starts, yes, a horse that I was very keen on earlier in the year. I think he is probably telling us that he is a little bit out-horsed with some other horses in this group here. If you think Cornucopian is as good as some other people might think he is, you've got Sandman in here. But it's coming back to Coal Battle for me. Based on his training pattern, it looks like Lonnie Briley's got him pretty much geared to go. He's got a very respectable high class rating. I think depending on which speed figures you look at, he's pretty close to Cornucopian in terms of speed figures, and he's won in the mud, which weather has become like a bigger factor for me recently,
Right.
as we get closer and closer to things recently. So I'm setting my my sights on Coal Battle in this one for sure.
All right, well then let's talk about it. Let's talk about Coal Battle. That's going to be He's going to be the second or third choice. If you like him, you should single him in this sequence. Forget about the fantasy. We can, but that because you don't even know your opinion. That is a great single, whether it's a double, pick three, pick four, because not only are you going thin in a race where either people are going cornucopian or spreading, but you're trying to beat the favorite at the same time, and you're allowing yourself to use your budget more. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone to get, leverage out of the horses you're using. I know those words might seem a little big. Really, you're just trying the real thing for people out there, not to you, Bailey, but the real thing to people out there kind of wonder, just picture the fact that you're playing against other people. And anytime somebody has a horse, there's a horse that's very common used and you don't use it and you beat it, all those people are out, or they had to go deeper than you did to get there. So we'll continue to talk about this over the years. I think building tickets is important, and it's important to not try to do too much too soon as well. But from your perspective, you've got an opinion with Coal Battle that you can do a lot with, and you should also just bet the horse to win, to be quite frank. That's not really a fun building tickets. From my perspective, if I like Cornucopia and I'm all in on him, you don't have to be all in on Coal Battle. You could use Coal Battle on a couple of other horses. I've got to be all in on Cornucopia no matter what I'm doing. If he's my pick, I'm keying him on the top of trifectas, superfectas, exactas. Doesn't matter the type of wager. I can't double spread. Back to what we were talking about before. When you bet, when you're already betting a short priced horse, adding another one kills the price that's already not good. That's the most simple way I think I can put it to make it make
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah, I think so for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, you got to be all in. And that's kind of the message why I kind of chose this sequence for this is just the idea that when you do like favorites, if they're 3-1 and you've got different opinions and horizontals around it that are more creative, you don't necessarily have to be all in. But horses like this, you've got to be all in because you're giving away so much equity every time you use another horse, even if this one wins. And you're clearly liking the horse. You know me, right? I'm not using a favorite on top if I don't think he's the very likeliest winner. So why would I use another horse?
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll see. Cornucopian versus Coal Battle. Me
Yeah,
versus
no,
you.
it's gonna be me versus you, regardless of
Check it
ticket
out.
structure.
As always, thank you so much for watching another episode of Horse Sense. This week, as we covered the Florida Derby at Gulfstream and the Arkansas Derby at Oaklawn on Saturday, make sure you're opted in to all those promotions that we mentioned, the money back special and that Florida Derby win boost on Xpressbet and FirstBet. And check out us on social to see more of Scott's picks as we head into this weekend. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.